You think you know audacity? You haven't met Karen, the Homeowners Association empress whose petty reign of terror, usually confined to the beige conformity of her suburban fiefdom, had begun to bleed onto our sovereign ranch land. It started insidiously, a scatter of unfamiliar gravel near the south fence line, easily dismissed as overflow from some distant county roadwork. But then came more, a veritable delta of crushed stone, then chunks of broken concrete, the unmistakable detritus of construction waste, piling up with an insolent permanence on our private property. Our ranch, a legacy breathed into existence by 3 generations of sweat and sacrifice, a sprawling expanse of golden fields and ancient oaks, was being treated as a clandestine landfill. The sheer volume, the deliberate placement just beyond the sweeping gaze of our primary surveillance system array, screamed malice, not accident. This wasn't casual dumping. This was a targeted desecration, an act of territorial aggression disguised in builder's rubble. Each new mound of gravel was a fresh insult, a brazen middle finger planted firmly in the soil our family had nurtured for nearly a century. We'd invested heavily in maintaining the integrity of our land, its ecological balance, its aesthetic peace. The sight of that foreign, jagged gravel, alien against the rich, dark earth, was a personal affront, a violation that stirred a cold anger deep in my gut. The construction waste was even worse. Rebar like exposed bone, jagged concrete like broken teeth. It was as if someone was trying to infect our land with urban decay. We'd walked that perimeter countless times, my grandpa and I tracing the lines drawn by his father, lines that meant more than just legal boundaries. They were lines of heritage, of belonging. And now, some anonymous dump truck, operating under a shroud of cowardly anonymity, was systematically erasing a piece of that, dumping its load and retreating before the sun even considered cresting the eastern hills. The quiet hum of the ranch, the rustle of wind through the long grass, the distant lowing of cattle, was now punctuated by the grating mental image of that industrial violation. It was a subtle invasion, but an invasion nonetheless, a beachhead of someone else's refuse on our cherished earth, a silent, accumulating testament to their contempt for our private property. The area they chose, a small dip in the terrain obscured by a copse of wild plums, was infuriatingly strategic, a dead zone for the existing cameras of our surveillance system, a detail too precise to be coincidental. This wasn't just about illegal dumping. This was personal. This was war, declared not with a bang, but with the stealthy rumble of a departing dump truck. The architect of this creeping defilement, we soon deduced, could only be one person, Karen Henderson, president of the adjacent Willow Creek Estates HOA, a woman whose thirst for control was as boundless as her apparent lack of self-awareness. She ruled her cul-de-sacs and meticulously manicured lawns with an iron fist encased in a sensible gardening glove, armed with a laminated copy of the CC, Rs, and an almost supernatural ability to detect a trash can, left out an hour past the designated pickup time. Our ranch bordered her domain, a sprawling, untamed counterpoint to her world of enforced beige and synchronized sprinkler systems. We weren't part of her HOA, a fact that seemed to endlessly irritate her. She viewed our comparatively unregulated existence as a personal affront, a chaotic anomaly marring her otherwise perfect suburban vista. We'd had minor skirmishes before, passive-aggressive notes about the visual impact of our distant barn, veiled complaints about dust during harvest season, the occasional escaped steer treated like a public menace. But this escalation, this systematic dumping of gravel and construction waste directly onto our land, was a declaration of a new, more aggressive front. Her motive, we figured, was a noxious blend of spite and opportunity. Perhaps she was renovating, or knew someone who was, and saw our secluded border as a convenient, free disposal site. Or maybe it was simpler, a power play, a way to assert dominance over territory she couldn't formally govern. The missing link was her new, ostentatiously large swimming pool, the construction of which had become the talk of her beige empire. The timing was too perfect, the nature of the debris, broken tiles, concrete slurry remnants, excess gravel, too specific. The blind spot in our surveillance system coverage felt less like an oversight on our part and more like a carefully exploited vulnerability. She operated with the smug assurance of someone who believed they were untouchable, shielded by the labyrinthine rules of her own making and the perceived apathy of those outside her immediate sphere of influence. Her kingdom was small, but her ambition to control, to impose her will, was vast and, as we were discovering, deeply malicious. She was the queen of her meticulously curated ant farm, and our sprawling independent ranch was the unkempt wilderness just beyond the glass, a constant, irritating reminder of a world that didn't bow to her decrees. The gravel wasn't just gravel. It was a territorial marker, a symbol of her contempt. Our initial attempts to address this felt like shouting into a void, a masterclass in bureaucratic deflection and feigned ignorance. We filed a formal complaint with the county, complete with photographs of the ever-growing piles of gravel and construction waste on our private property. Their response was a symphony of buck-passing and jurisdictional shoulder-shrugging. Without witnessing the act of dumping from the dump truck itself, or clear footage from your surveillance system identifying the vehicle and perpetrator on your land, our hands are tied, came the officious, unhelpful reply. The local sheriff's deputy, who reluctantly came out to inspect our desecrated ranch land, offered sympathetic noises but echoed the sentiment. No direct proof, no case. We knew with a chilling certainty that Karen was behind it. The news of her opulent new pool, complete with Italian marble coping and a dedicated tanning ledge, was spreading through the local gossip mill, often accompanied by hushed remarks about the surprising lack of visible construction waste at her meticulously kept property. Where had all that displaced earth, the old patio concrete, the surplus materials gone? The answer lay in ugly, festering mounds on our side of the fence. We even considered hiring a private investigator, but the cost was prohibitive, and the chances of catching her red-handed, after the fact, seemed slim. She was too cunning for that, too adept at operating in the shadows. The legal avenues felt like dead ends, blocked by her careful exploitation of our surveillance system's single blind spot. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Our land, visibly violated, yet legally untouchable. The injustice of it gnawed at us, a constant, dull ache. Karen, meanwhile, continued her reign, undoubtedly preening over her nearly completed pool, her monument to suburban excess, blissfully unaware, or perhaps arrogantly dismissive, of the silent rage building just beyond her property line. The moral violation was profound. She had taken something precious, our connection to this land, and treated it with utter contempt, turning a piece of our heritage into her personal dumping ground. The frustration was immense, a tightening coil in my chest. The system, designed to protect private property, was failing us, stymied by a lack of a single damning frame of video. The gravel piles grew, a daily reminder of her impunity and our impotence. Then Grandpa spoke. My grandfather, a man of few words and even fewer wasted motions, had been observing this entire sorting saga with a quiet intensity that was far more unnerving than any outburst of anger. He'd walk the perimeter with me, his gaze lingering on the mounds of gravel and construction waste, his jaw set in a line as hard as the granite bedrock beneath our ranch. He'd listen to our frustrating calls with the county, his silence punctuated only by the occasional, almost imperceptible nod. He was a man whose roots ran as deep in this land as the oldest oaks, a living embodiment of its stoic resilience. He wasn't a brawler, not prone to rash action, but his sense of justice was absolute, forged in decades of honest work and unwavering principle. One evening, as the sun bled crimson across the western sky, casting long shadows from the encroaching piles of Karen's refuse, he turned to me, his eyes like chips of winter ice. "They've mistaken our patience for weakness," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This isn't about the county or the sheriff anymore. This is about us, about this land. Some messes," he paused, looking towards Karen's property, where the faint sounds of evening pool construction still hummed, "require a different kind of cleanup." A chill went down my spine. This wasn't the resigned frustration I'd been feeling. This was something else, a cold, calculated resolve. The reluctant warrior, the man who had calmly faced down droughts, market crashes, and personal tragedies with an unshakable pragmatism, was stirring. He'd spent a lifetime building, nurturing, protecting this ranch. The sight of Karen's arrogance, her casual desecration of his life's work, had finally breached his formidable defenses. He didn't raise his voice, didn't pound his fist. He simply stated a fact, a shift in the tactical landscape. The rules of engagement, it seemed, were about to change. He had a particular look, one I'd seen rarely, usually when dealing with a predatory animal threatening the livestock or a particularly intractable piece of machinery. It was a look of intense focus, of a problem being dissected, analyzed, and a solution being engineered with ruthless efficiency. The gravel on our land, the silent taunt from her dump truck, the legal impasse, these were merely variables in an equation he was now determined to solve. His next words were soft, almost a whisper, yet they carried the weight of an anvil. "She wants a pool filled with something. We'll help her with that." Grandpa's plan, when it unfolded, was a masterpiece of audacious simplicity and tactical genius. A page ripped straight from a special operations manual, albeit one adapted for suburban warfare. Operation Pool Party Pooper, as I privately dubbed it, began not with anger, but with meticulous reconnaissance. Grandpa, tapping into a network of old friends and acquaintances from his younger, more varied career days, a life before he fully committed to the ranch that hinted at skills beyond agriculture, started gathering intelligence on Karen's pool construction. He learned the name of the contractor, the schedule for the final phases, and, most importantly, the exact specifications of the materials being used. His sidekick in this was old Jed, a retired cement truck driver who lived a few miles down the road, a man whose knowledge of concrete was almost poetic, and whose disdain for HOAs was legendary. Jed provided crucial insights into delivery timings, mixing protocols, and the subtle art of blending in on a busy construction site. The disguise was procured with similar quiet efficiency: a slightly used set of generic construction worker overalls, a faded baseball cap, and a pair of steel-toed boots that had seen better days. Grandpa, a man usually seen in well-worn denim and flannel, looked surprisingly convincing. He studied blueprints of similar pool designs sourced from the internet, calculating volumes, envisioning access points. He even practiced a slight, anonymous stoop, the kind of posture that makes a man invisible in a crowd of laborers. This wasn't just about revenge, he'd explained, his eyes glinting with a cold fire. It was about a proportional response, a message delivered with the precision of a laser-guided munition. "She filled a part of our land with unwanted solids," he'd said, a grim smile playing on his lips. "It's only fitting we return the favor to her new water feature." The plan was to intercept or coincide with the final concrete delivery, not for the pool shell itself, which was already cured, but for the surrounding deck or perhaps a late-stage feature. Or, even better, to introduce our own special mix when the pool was just about to be filled with water after the delicate tile work was complete, when its vulnerability was at its peak. The beauty of it was its deniability. If done correctly, it would look like a catastrophic error by the construction crew, or a baffling act of vandalism with no clear culprit. Our surveillance system, which Karen had so cleverly bypassed, would offer us the same plausible deniability. There would be no footage of Grandpa on her property, just as there was none of her dump truck on ours. The day of reckoning arrived cloaked in the ordinary light of a Tuesday morning, the kind of day where suburban routines hum along with predictable mediocrity. For Karen, it was supposed to be a day closer to realizing her backyard Xanadu. For Grandpa, it was day. He was up before dawn, a silent, determined figure moving through the pre-dawn gloom of the ranch. Dressed in his workman's disguise, he was almost unrecognizable. He timed his arrival at Karen's cul-de-sac to coincide with the anticipated flurry of late-stage construction activity. He carried a nondescript thermos and a lunch pail, blending seamlessly with the other workers already milling about. I watched from a discreet distance, a knot of apprehension and fierce pride tightening in my chest. He'd found out that the pool was indeed nearly finished, the tiles pristine, the plumbing complete. They were due to start cleaning it for the first water fill that afternoon. The opportunity was perfect, almost poetic. A concrete mixer, a different one from the main pool construction, was scheduled for a smaller job nearby, a new driveway 2 streets over. Jed had incidentally learned its route and timing. Grandpa's refined plan was audacious, not to hijack it, but to be it, or rather, to arrange for a special, expedited delivery of his own. He'd called in a massive favor with a contact who ran a small, independent concrete supply, arranging for a load of rapidly setting, industrial-grade concrete to be ready, a canceled order that needed to be disposed of quickly. The driver, a man who owed Grandpa more than he could ever repay, was briefed. The timing had to be perfect. As Karen's property buzzed with the final preparations, our unmarked, slightly battered concrete mixer trundled down the street, looking for all the world like a lost contractor or a last-minute addition to the poolside hardscaping. Grandpa, now looking like a seasoned foreman, waved it authoritatively towards Karen's driveway. The regular crew was on a mandated coffee break, a detail Jed had also overheard. The stage was set. The pristine, empty shell of Karen's pool gleamed invitingly, a symbol of her entitlement, moments away from its liquid baptism, or so she thought. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his mission, a silent avenger amidst the suburban sprawl. The concrete mixer backed up, its heavy drum beginning its slow, ominous churn. The critical moment unfolded with a surreal, almost balletic precision. Grandpa, with a curt nod to the driver of the strategically acquired concrete mixer, a man whose face was a mask of grim determination, directed the chute, not towards some innocuous patch of decking, but straight over the gleaming, freshly tiled edge of Karen's near-perfect pool. The regular construction crew were, as anticipated, enjoying their donuts and coffee at the far end of the street, blissfully unaware of the monumental act of sabotage unfolding just yards away. The first viscous gray sludge of concrete slopped into the deep end with a sound like a monstrous, deliberate gulp. It was a shocking contrast. The dark, heavy mass against the bright turquoise tile, a creeping tide of liquid stone. One of Karen's teenage kids wandered out, phone to ear, glanced idly, and wandered back in, likely assuming it was just another phase of the endless construction. Grandpa didn't rush. He moved with a deliberate calm, ensuring the flow was even, relentless. The pool, designed for sparkling blue water, for laughter and leisurely swims, began its transformation into a solid, immutable monument to Karen's hubris. Each cubic yard of concrete that poured in was a silent scream of defiance, a heavy, unyielding answer to the piles of gravel and construction waste on our land. The sheer volume was astounding. This wasn't just a token gesture. This was a complete, irreversible entombment. The driver of the concrete mixer, a man clearly enjoying his role in this unorthodox brand of justice, managed the controls with professional detachment, his eyes occasionally flicking towards Grandpa for subtle cues. There were no shouts, no alarms, just the steady, hungry roar of the mixer and the relentless flow of gray death into that suburban dream. It was an act of such colossal, silent audacity that it almost defied belief. The pristine pool, her symbol of status and victory, was methodically, inexorably being filled with concrete, transformed from a future oasis into a present-day sarcophagus. Grandpa oversaw the final surge, ensuring the concrete reached a level that would leave no doubt as to the intention. It wasn't a mishap, it was a statement. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The chute was retracted, the drum of the concrete mixer spun clean, and the truck rumbled away, leaving behind a scene of quiet, profound devastation. The retreat was as smooth as the infiltration. Grandpa, his disguise still intact, simply walked away from the scene of the crime, melting back into the mundane rhythm of the neighborhood before anyone was the wiser. He was back on the ranch, overalls exchanged for his familiar denim, before the first horrified shriek likely echoed from Karen's backyard. We didn't have to wait long. The discovery, we later heard through the neighborhood grapevine, a network far more efficient than any formal news agency, was suitably operatic. Karen, returning from a triumphant HOA committee meeting where she'd no doubt been dictating the precise shade of petunia permissible in communal flower beds, had gone to admire her nearly completed pool, perhaps envisioning her inaugural dip. Instead, she was greeted by a monolithic slab of wet, gray concrete, a still-settling testament to a meticulously executed revenge. Her reaction, as described by gleeful neighbors who had long suffered under her tyrannical reign, was volcanic. Screams that could curdle milk, threats of lawsuits against everyone from the pool company to God himself. A meltdown of epic proportions. The pool, her suburban jewel, was now a solid, immovable block, a costly, embarrassing testament to something. But what? And by whom? That was the beauty of Grandpa's plan. Just as she had left no trace when her dump truck surreptitiously deposited load after load of gravel and construction waste on our private property, so too had Grandpa left no calling card. The rogue concrete mixer was long gone, its driver a ghost. The temporary workers who might have seen something were, by then, scattered to other job sites, none the wiser about the true orchestrator. The blame initially fell, as Grandpa predicted, squarely on the pool construction company, who vehemently denied any involvement, pointing to their meticulous records and the alien nature of the concrete now occupying the pool. Accusations flew, investigations were launched, but the truth remained stubbornly elusive, buried under several tons of rapidly hardening evidence. The schadenfreude in the community was palpable. For years, Karen had lorded her petty power over them, and now her grandest project, her ultimate status symbol, was a catastrophic, concrete-filled failure. It was, as Grandpa quietly remarked over dinner that evening, his expression utterly deadpan, a solid piece of work. The fallout was glorious, a slow-motion demolition of Karen's carefully constructed authority. At the next HOA meeting, usually a forum for her to issue decrees from on high, Karen was a sputtering, incoherent wreck. She tried to rally sympathy, to paint herself as the victim of some nefarious, large-scale sabotage, but her credibility, already thin from years of petty tyranny, was now shattered. The whispers started, quiet at first, then growing louder. Whispers about the mysterious piles of gravel and construction waste that had appeared on the old Miller ranch, our ranch. Coincidence? Perhaps. But in the vacuum of concrete evidence against any specific party for the pool incident, people began to connect the dots, or at least to draw their own, more satisfying conclusions. Anonymous photos of the dump sites on our land, taken by us after Grandpa's operation, carefully curated to show the extent of the damage without revealing our hand in the pool affair, began to circulate via email and local social media groups. Suddenly, Karen's victim narrative looked less convincing and more like potential karmic retribution. The neighbors, the silent majority who had endured her reign of terror over fence heights and lawn gnome placement, began to find their courage. Questions were asked not just about the pool, but about HOA finances, about transparency, about the president's increasingly erratic behavior. Her throne, built on a foundation of laminated rules and intimidation, started to wobble. The concrete in her pool became a local legend, a symbol of spectacular, mysterious comeuppance. Some even joked it was modern art, a commentary on suburban emptiness. The police investigation into the pool incident stalled, another unsolved suburban mystery. There were no witnesses willing or able to identify Grandpa or the phantom concrete mixer. The cost to remove the several tons of industrial-grade concrete from her pool and then repair or replace the structure was astronomical. Her dream oasis had become a financial and logistical nightmare, a permanent, ugly scar in her perfect backyard, a constant reminder of her overreach. Our private property line, once a target for her illicit dumping, suddenly seemed inviolable. The message, delivered in cubic yards of unyielding stone, had been received. The reckoning was quiet, but absolute. Karen's reign as HOA president crumbled not with a dramatic coup, but with the slow erosion of respect and the sheer weight of her public humiliation and private financial disaster. The cost of excavating the mountain of concrete from her pool was ruinous. She eventually had to sell the house at a significant loss. The concrete-filled pool, a notorious liability that scared off most buyers. The new owners, bless their practical hearts, simply had it filled in completely and turned it into a rather lovely sunken garden. Our ranch, however, flourished in the ensuing peace. The gravel and construction waste, though still a scar, were slowly being reclaimed by nature, a reminder of a battle fought and won not with shouts, but with strategic silence and an audacious application of building materials. Grandpa returned to his quiet routines, the steward of the land, his equilibrium restored. He never spoke of the incident directly, but sometimes, surveying the fence line where the dumping had occurred, a faint, almost imperceptible smile would touch his lips. He had drawn a line, not in the sand, but in concrete, a boundary that even Karen, in her boundless arrogance, could not ignore. The moral of the story, if there is one, is perhaps that even the most entrenched bullies can be brought down by a well-placed, well-timed application of their own tactics, amplified and returned with chilling precision. Our land was ours again, its sanctity restored. The surveillance system still watched, but the primary threat had been neutralized, entombed in her own backyard. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind whistled just right, I could almost swear I heard the faint, ghostly chuckle of a concrete mixer, a sound that, for us, was the sweet music of justice. You might think it extreme, what Grandpa did, filling her pool with concrete. But then again, you didn't see the systematic, cold-blooded dumping on our private property, the utter contempt for our heritage, the smug belief that she, the HOA Karen, was above consequence. They didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know the depth of a quiet man's resolve when his land, his legacy, was threatened. They learned. Oh, they learned. Some lessons are best taught in stone.